Okay, we should be live. Hello, everybody. How are you doing today? Um, as you all know, I sometimes struggle with whether I'm really live or not, but I'm going to assume that we are live. And for those of you, most of you, if you're here, you know who I am. And I want to say thank you all for giving me your time and spending it with me. I know that we're all very busy and it's not always easy to break loose. I'm looking over there. I just looked at my monitor. I couldn't help it just to see if I was really on the live channel, and I am. And
Thank
so
you.
the other thing I wanted to do is introduce Chris. Now you say Pelletier or Pelletier? What do you say?
Well, my dad would say Pelletier. I say Pelletier.
Okay. Well, all that matters is what you answer to, probably both of them, right?
Either one.
That's right. So, Chris, the way I got in touch with Chris is I was watching the Make. So Michael Bernasconi, I know you're a mentor for the Make and monitor or whatever they call that term. You help Bull with that. And so you're familiar with Chris and a couple other Facebook groups where Chris was posting models. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And then I saw him post model after model after model. And I just thought, man, he's a workhorse. He must have this process down. And so I reached out to Chris and found out, to my pleasant surprise, he was a really nice guy, just like a lot of people in the CNC and maker world, and willing to share his knowledge. And so, with that, I asked Chris if he would be willing to come on to my live and walk through his process. And the process is very similar to what Michael Bernasconi was talking to me about in the past. And he's also mentioned in a couple Mark Lindsay lives how he goes through and puts a skin on, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is Michael may have other things that he does or adds to it. And he can comment at the end if he wants, if there's something he sees that might be helpful for all of us. We're all here to learn and share. And with that, I wanted to go ahead and just set the stage. Chris is going to go through his process from A to Z. And I may once in a while ask him a question here and there. But for the most part, I don't plan on asking Chris many questions. But then I have a tendency to gab, as some of you guys know. So I'm going to try not to. But if I have a question that I think might be beneficial for all of us, then I'll ask a question and he'll stop and answer it. But other questions, I want you to put them in the chat and put like question marks or something in there so I can see it. And I'm going to pretty much, unless it's something urgent, I'm going to pretty much hold it till the end of the session because I don't want to interrupt Chris getting through his whole process. And if we're asking too many questions, he'll never get through it because it's so interesting on what he's doing. So what Chris and I have worked out is he's taken an actual project that he's done. And so he's not going to go necessarily through all the detailed sculpting and things like that he does because he just doesn't have enough time. But he's going to go through exactly what he did and demonstrate certain parts of it so that you can see it. So the goal is he'll start with first going out and getting an artificial intelligence art model, and he's going to show you the prompts and the things he does to get that and what software he uses. And then he's going to take a model that he already got through that process, and he's going to walk through how he does that. With that, I don't want to take up any more time of Chris's. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and I'm going to put up his screen as soon as he tells me put up my screen.
So you can put it up. Hi, guys. So the first thing I want to do is when I want to make a model, I do two things. I use Copilot and I use Marigold Depth Estimator. And what I've found is the most important thing to get what you want out of AI, which can be very frustrating, is your wording.
Were you going to make that big, Chris?
Oh yes, wording here. And so these are the things the things that I put in that really help AI give me what I want. I always add the highest possible contrast, extremely balanced lighting, clear and sharp contours, strong shadows. So those statements I always try to incorporate into what I'm doing. And this is my actual verbiage that I use. Feel free to use it. You just I got this verbiage, believe it or not, from Kyle from Learn your CNC through the Academy.
Is there any way you can make that a little larger? Do you know how?
Yeah, I can make this larger. Let's make this.
Make it big so we can see it on phones. There we go. That works.
So it's a grayscale image of a whitetail buck is what I did this time with the highest possible contrast, which is one of the points representing a relief model for CNC routing. I don't know whether or not that's important, but that's what we put. The image must feature extremely balanced lighting to make the details visible across the model. Very clear, sharp contours and textures. So that is my prompt that I use in AI in Copilot. I just plug in here what I want, whether it's whitetail buck, whether it's American eagle, and then you can add other things. This was just a whitetail buck. You can put a whitetail buck in a frame. You can tell whitetail buck in the woods. You play around with any of the words, and it's kind of hit or miss with AI. And sometimes you go through 10 pictures before you find one you like. So that is the process that I use there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back down and I'm going to select that whole thing. So what I do is I paste and copy, and then what I do is I come over to Copilot, which is on my computer, and then you have two options here. You can use Copilot or Designer and Copilot. The thing about Copilot, this one, you can choose being more creative, more balanced, or more precise. I will use the same prompt with the same thing like the whitetail buck, and I'll alternate and see which one of these gives me a better result. So if I right click here, and paste, there's my prompt, and then I hit enter, and then it's going to go through its process. It doesn't take long, but usually it gives you 4 to choose from. And depending on what time of day, we'll also tell you. So here's a bunch of different pictures, and you can go in and choose it. You like it, you can download it. So what I did is I'm not going to download it, but I picked this one here that I like, and then I'm going to download it. I'm not going to do that. So what I've done is once I download it, I then open up this Marigold depth map. And you can go to this link here and you can open it up and find it. And then what I do is you're going to upload your picture. So you find it. So here's my buck that I got. You download it. There's the image. So then what I do is I'm going to.
So that's the image you got out of Copilot, Chris?
This is the image I got out of Copilot.
Pretty impressive.
The one that I liked.
And now you must have added something in there to get the frame then?
Right. So what I did is I said a whitetail buck in a frame, and that's what gives me. Sometimes you get a full complete frame. Sometimes you only get a partial frame. Again, you may have to do it 5 times to get the one you like. but this one I really like this one. So then I just compute right down here, and here it's just whirling, come up over here as a depth map. It doesn't use. It takes about 30 seconds usually. Kind of gives you. Well, now it's a little busy, so I'm in a queue. So it might. It's moving. It may take 30 seconds or so.
We got 30 seconds. Don't worry about it, Chris.
Yeah. So as I'm doing this, I may, like I said, I may go on Copilot for an hour and find, plug in all kinds of ideas and maybe download 10 pictures. And then I will come back to Marigold later on and I will make them as a depth map and I'll download those. Not all of them are created equal. Some carve better. Some are just don't lend themselves to carve well. And that's just the experience that you got to just play with it. I'm not a computer guru, so I don't totally understand this site that much. But you get two different views here. I have no idea what this red heat one is for, but it's not the depth map. I don't know. So what you've got to do is you come down to the bottom, and when you pick which one you want, you need to pick the 16-bit PNG. Vectric won't work with any of these others. So you just download it, and once you've downloaded it, let me show you what I've done there. Next. Here we go. So I'm going to bring in my Aspire. And what I'm going to do is I'll show you what I did. So I come up to this icon here, which is import a bitmap. And here's what I downloaded. So here's my picture. And then here's my depth map. So I start with a depth map. I bring it in. Now it's very important not to wiggle or move your model out of place, because when you start laying things together, it's going to look blurred. So if you notice that with the way Vectric recognizes things, the dark, that would be sunken in. It's not what you want. You want the nose prominent. So what you need to do is you need to invert. So you come over here to the picture editor, and then you come up to this spot here where it says invert. There's grayscale and invert. We use invert, and then you apply it. I don't change any of these settings. Vectric settings seems to work very well. Go ahead and play with them. Maybe you're going to get better just, than I do. I haven't really played with it too much. Again, I'm not the computer guru. I kind of use what I have here, and it seems to work pretty well. So now I just hit apply, and then I close. So here's my depth map. As you can see, the nose now is turned. It's inverted. It's white. So I come up here to create a component from this bitmap. So now if you look down here really fast, you're going to see a blue thing that goes by really fast. You can't tell that it's even doing anything. So boom, it just did it. So now you go over to your 3D, and there's your body. This is the body that the depth map creates.
And if you go to your components, you'll see, Chris, if you go to your components, you'll see a component, right?
Right. That is a component. So it's your component called your depth map. So what I do here is I look at it. It's going to have a lot of texture in here, which for this component, you want very little texture because it'll take too long. It'll translate to your carving, and every one of these undulations, your bit's going to have to go through, which will take forever. So I try to I double click on it, and then these in Vectric 12, it has these new things here. I don't know what you call them, but you could just go into your components, and they're all here too. You can use this. This is the same as these. So I just use these. So what I do is I don't want to build any base height, because if I build base height, when you're finished making your model, it might be 4 inches thick, and you're not going to have the stock to do that, and you're going to be very unhappy that you can't fit it on a 3/4 inch stock or a 1 inch stock. So I'm mindful on thickness as you're working. So what I'll do is I'll just go with this is going to raise the contour only. This would raise contour and the base, which right now I don't want. So I'm just going to slightly raise it just a little bit. And you can see how it changes the depth just a tiny little bit. So I'll keep that. Once I like this, what I will do is I'll come over here and I'll bake it. Before I bake it, if you want to make a duplicate, you can. So because maybe you didn't like the bake, maybe you don't like this height, so you can make a duplicate of the way it is, turn it off, and I've also learned inserting new levels. So now I've got this one, and I'm going to bake this one. So I just go ahead and bake it. I kind of like the way that is for right now. Now what I do is I go back to my components and I just turn it off. I go back to my 2D view, and what I do now is I go back up here to create another component. This is off, so don't worry about this. So now I'm going to go in and I'm going to find the actual picture of the model. This is going to be my skin. That's what I call it. It's an overlay. There's the actual picture. And again, don't wiggle, don't move it, because you're going to get a blurred. It's just, or you're going to have to use the centering tool and make sure everything is centered, which is fine too. So what I do with this is I go over here and I'm going to create the model or component from this picture. This creates a skin. Again, it's going to do it very quickly. You're not even going to know it's done. So you just click on it.
So it's the same thing you did with the depth map. You're repeating that.
Exact same thing.
But you didn't have to invert this picture. You just inverted the depth map.
Correct. This you want just as the picture. And now when you go over to your 3D, there's the picture. But if you scroll in and you look, it's lots of undulations, a lot of texture, a lot of things moving in and out. This would be a nightmare for you to carve. It would take you forever. So what I do is, if I like the way this is, what I like to do is I like to just open this up, and I like to actually lower some of this noise just a little bit. Just a little bit. So I like that. So now I'm going to go over here and immediately bake it, because I know what I've been doing, and I like that. So I'm going to bake it. So now if I go back to my components, I have two. I have the whitetail buck, and then I have the whitetail depth map. So if I turn the two on, watch this screen, you'll just see how it builds it up. So now we've got a little bit of depth. The only problem is, and this is nice, some people you can carve this. You can actually clean this up a little bit, smoothen it out, and carve it as is, and it would be a beautiful model. But I like to really accentuate it and bring up some of the body, the head, the antlers, and this is where I say the magic happens. So what I end up doing is, now I will save this piece here and I'll duplicate it. And again, I like to duplicate things and I'll just get it out of the way and turn it off. Whoops. So now I have my two pieces here, and I like the way this is. I'm okay with it. So what I do is you can't manipulate this until you bake it together. You make it one component. So that's what I do. I come back down here all the way where the oven is and bake it. So now it's one component. If you go back to your components, you see it's only one component. Kyle would tell me to rename this or to name it, whatever you want. Everybody's going to have their own routine, what they do. Sometimes I rename it, sometimes I don't. My fingers don't type very well, so I do everything to avoid typing. So I'm not going to change it. So now what I do is I will go back to my 2D view and I'll look at this picture here. And I need to change the appearance because when I'm working with my vectors, I want to see what I'm doing. So I turn it down. So now when I go to my design and go into my vectors, which is here, I use this draw polyline. And I start working. I can see what I'm doing. If you didn't change the appearance, it would be very hard to see. So what I do is I start with, let's just say, the antlers. I start drawing.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
You mentioned something key when we were practicing before about making sure for you use the S key to change it from a smooth line to a straight line or a straight line to a smooth line.
Absolutely. So you see there's a little S curve on this. If I hit the S on my keyboard, it changes it to straight lines. So now if I do this, they're going to be straight lines. They're not going to be curves. So I've found using the curve works best. Now, since I've already started drawing, what I've learned is if you just hit the back button on your computer, you can just go back to where, so if you made a mistake, you just go back to where you were. So now I'm going to change this back to smoothening. And okay, now what happens if I go here? Oh, I don't want to be there. I just hit the back button on my computer and it brings me back to where I was, where I want to keep going. So it's not too difficult to just draw. So what I'm not going to go through this entire thing drawing, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you what I've done for this model. So these are all the vectors that I've drawn for this guy. I draw a whole body, which is all the way around it. And I start from the base and work my way up. Always start at the foundation. This is my foundation. It's the whole thing. And then I go to this, which is a little bit more of his chest. And I build up his chest a little bit. Then I build this little tuft. I just want to accentuate it. So I actually will draw it and do it. So what I do is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the body and I'm going to come over to my tools. And I'm going to hit this round shaped component.
So Chris, you said the first vector you drew was around the whole body.
Correct.
And then you started going into the other vectors. Is that right?
Yes. I do is I continue to draw the whole body. Then I go to what are the other pieces I want to draw. I try to stay in the drawing tool until I've drawn all the vectors that I want to draw. But you can go back and say, oh, I don't like the way this looks. I want to add more. You can add components on top of components on top of components. It doesn't matter. That's the nice thing about Vectric. So once I've gotten this full body, I picked the create a round shape, and I'm going to make sure it's on add. This is very important. Don't use the merge. Don't use, stick with add for now. So you hit create. Over here, now you see I've created a body. So I'm going to go right over to my 3D view. Oh, but I'm sorry. What I need to do is turn my my whitetail on. Actually, I'm not going to turn these. I'm going to turn the baked one on. Sorry. Just baked. So now you see, oh, that's not what I wanted. I'm sorry. Well, we'll go to this one. So as you see right now, again, this is the plain Jane. There's nothing that I've built onto it yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to here. I'm going to just type in 30 degrees. Hit enter. As you can see, it brought this up. Whether you like it or not, you can go a little less, a little more. If you want to change it, if you want to use a little bit and make it a little flatter here, you don't like the bubbly look, just change it however you want. I try to start slow and just maybe go 28 degrees and see how that looks. So that's looking good for now. It's a work in progress. You got to keep working at it. So I go to my design, and let's say we're going to build onto this piece here next, and I would just hit another component, and I use the round. For 90% of what I use is round, because you can manipulate it pretty well. So there's the green. That's my component. Now, Vectric 2, you can select it as a node, and you can actually move your component in this window. I don't like it yet. It doesn't work that great for me. But so now you bring this little chest piece up just a little bit. A little is a lot, so I just start to go slowly when I build. And then I don't close it. I go back to my 2D, and then I'm going to take this piece here. Let's say I want to build his tuft. Again, I'm in my create round shape. I'm going to create that one. As you can see now, it's created. Go back to my 3D, and I build this up however you want. Let's say you did it here and you don't like it, so I'm gonna flatten it out just a little bit here. So I kind of like that. You just twiddle it. You look at it around and see, do you like it? Do you not like it? Add more, delete it, and go from there. So what I'm going to do, that's the process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my components here, and I'm just going to delete these 3 that I just did. And what I'll do is I will turn on all of my components. That I came up with, that I built.
Over hours of time.
Yeah, these components take a lot of time. Let me see here. I'm going to turn these. So that's what it turned out to be. So the head is up. I added some nose. I added the chest. I added a little extra to the body. You look, I added a bunch to the antlers. I actually, one thing that I like to do also is when I use a component, just for an example, I come over here. Sometimes I want to use tilt or fade. Comes in very handy. When I was doing this model, I wanted the model or part of the head to tilt up rather than being flat. I wanted him looking up. So when I built the component, which was just the head, this piece here, which is right there, I built it up, and then I tilted it. So I started the tilt, I locked it in here, started the tilt here, and then brought the nose up. So that way, in the 3D model, the nose actually looks, the head actually looks like it's up a little bit. So here's my final rendition. If you see, the head is actually is tilted up. The antlers, I did the same thing. I raised them up, but the head, I found that when I do models, you need to pick a focal point. I picked the face or the head as a focal point on a lot of my models, and I really want to make that pronounced. So I wanted that to show up a little bit more. So I popped it up. I tilted it. So it locked. It's not as high here as it is here. So if you see the model, that guy's coming up a bit. So that's what I do. So this was the final piece that I came up with. Now you need, as you see this background, originally, if you look, I think it's this one. If you look at this one, you see all this background. Just for an example, you have to smooth. There's a couple different smoothing tools that I use. So once you have this and you bake it in, you cannot smoothen anything unless it's baked. So I always go back down and just make sure I bake it. So now it's baked and it's in this active mode. I go into here, which is down here, which is the sculpting tool, which is where you can smoothen things, or you can do just an all around, an entire smooth. Sometimes I click that and start with that. And then what I do is I come over here and I will very slowly choose a little bit. And as you can see, every time I click this, you can see things changing and smoothing out. So that would be way too much for the body. I mean, I've lost everything I want in the body. At this stage, I'm looking at the body, what I like. I can do more smoothing later, but this is kind of an overall smoothing. So I'd say, okay, that's okay for now. So I'm going to bake that. If you hit close, it doesn't keep what you just did. So now you've baked it. Now now you can close it. It's accepted that bake. So now I re-highlight that component and go back into my smoothing tool on the bottom here, sculpting. And this allows me to use, and this is what Rob told me is, I guess there's a new version that corrected this. I haven't updated my version yet. But when you get this, if you haven't updated yours and you get this black screen, that's because you need to come over here to the bottom of the screen and say show visibility of model. So if you unclick it, now you can see it again. So now you have smoothing, smudging, adding, subtracting, and then undo brush. So figure these as all of like a paintbrush. So I've got smoothing on right now, and as you can see how small or how big that blue circle is. You want to make it bigger? Make it bigger. I want to smoothen this background. So I'm going to choose a really big brush. I always start with a little strength and just a little smooth, just to see the reaction is going to be. So I start when you're blue, you're not doing anything. When you hit your mouse, your left mouse, it turns red. That means it's active. So as soon as you start moving, it's going to start smoothing. Anywhere you go, it's going to smooth. Now, you can just do it more or less. Sometimes the more you go, if you're on these lines, where the frame is, you could round off the edges more than you want. So that's a pretty weak strength. If you go to a big strength and with a lot of smoothness, watch what happens to this frame. It's really smooth now. They get rid of all this smudging. Whether you like this look or not, it's whatever you decide. So you can smoothen this background. I don't want to touch the deer. So I just keep going here. You might have to scroll in and try to get really close to the edge. Sometimes you can't get to the edge, so you have to go down with a smaller brush and then try smoothing. But if you go inside here, now I didn't want that. So now the only thing you can do, because I didn't save what I was doing, you got to go down here and you can remove. You remove it, everything you've done. Why isn't it doing it? Oh, discard. I'm sorry, not remove. Discard. And then you say yes. Now you've discarded everything I just did. So what I do is, let's say I want to smoothen. I do a little bit at a time. I like it. My hands hasn't slipped into something I don't want. I hit keep a couple times. Now I can go back and continue. Now if I go to here and oh crap, I didn't mean to do that. I can hit discard, hit yes. It only discarded this and this, but it kept what I already kept. So I do a little bit of work. I like it. My hand didn't slip into something I didn't want. I hit keep. It's just kind of like saving. Because if I'm going in here and I'm really trying to be careful, and oh, my mouse just slipped, boom. Yeah, well, I'm like, I can discard that, and at least I have some of my work done. So
Chris,
that's what
Chris, this is one of those statements where you say, "Don't ask me how I know," right? Didn't you say you had an oops that caught you a lot of time?
I'm sorry, Rob, you're breaking up on me.
I said, Chris, you said this is one of those statements where you say save often, because you say, "Don't ask me how I know that," because you had a couple instances.
Oh yeah, I actually was working on something for about 5 hours, and all of a sudden Vectrix crashed, and came up a scene saying send notification to Vectrix. I said crud. I hit and I lost everything. You sometimes when you and that's if I haven't saved my model. I do know now is if when I have saved a model in progress, if it does crash, I can get back to where I was before it crashed, but I lose all the work. So at least, but I lost 5 hours worth of work. So I had to start from scratch. So yeah, save often.
So because we're talking about time and all of that, and you use the term you lost 5 hours worth of work, there's a question out there. I might as well throw it up now. The Jim Matthews is asking, it's on the screen right now. It says, on a project like this, how much time does it take you to go from AI image to toolpaths?
Some models, it takes me an hour. Some takes me 5 hours. So it all depends on how detailed it is. This model actually took me about maybe 3.5 hours to do.
Thanks.
You know, this model here that I'll show, this one had a lot of detail.
You
This
need
one
to move it a little bit more, Chris. Can you see it in your?
Oh,
There
there
we
you
go.
go.
Let me see if I can switch you around. Hold on.
Sure.
Okay, now we can see you.
So this model has a lot of detail. This one, all the little undulations and everything. This one took me probably 8 hours to do in 2 sittings. 4 and 4. My butt gets tired. But and I again, save often, go get a drink, clear your eyes out, and get back to it. But I just like the creativity of what I can come up with. I like the idea. I went from just a regular picture to this guy. Now I was not intending originally. This doing a whitetail buck was not my initial idea. One of my customers who's bought some things from me asked if I've ever had the idea to do one of them, and I said, sure, I could try. I can look for something and see what I like. I mean, I got lots of different ideas, and I did this, and I've actually. This is why I came up with this one. I'm from New England, so if you've looked at any of my models, I do a lot of sea and beach and ocean sea theme stuff because I'm a New Englander and I like the ocean. So crabs and sea turtles and horseshoe crabs and different things I really enjoy. Some people ask me, can I do this? Can I do that? I know some people out there in this CNC world or this digital world that you can go to and ask them to do a custom model. They're way more professional than me, way ahead of me. But they charge they can charge $150 to do it. Someone asked me, could you possibly do this? I do it, and I don't change the price. Whatever my model prices are that I've set is what they are. So they're almost getting a custom design for, an eighth of the cost. So that doesn't bother me. I'm not into it for the money. I try to sell my models to pay for the wood that I use to carve things. And I just really enjoy being creative on this platform.
Great, Chris. You covered a lot of stuff. I appreciate you taking your time and going through all this. Was there something else you wanted to cover in this, or are you ready for questions and summary and stuff?
I think I'm ready for questions. Yeah, I think I'm pretty much done with my process. I mean, it's the process. There are steps that I try to keep the same so I don't forget something or skip a process. So when you're trying to develop your own style or process of doing this, I recommend doing it the same every single time. Bringing in your depth map first or the skin first. It doesn't matter. Bringing the two in, making duplicates, then baking, because you can't manipulate anything until they're baked. But once you baked, yes, you can go in Vectric and undo. You can unbake things, but it's just kind of making one component out of two. So I say develop your own process. And that to me was important to figure out a workflow, which made it easier for me and less for me to forget.
Great. Michael Bernasconi, you can see his statement says, Chris, that was a great explanation of your process. And I agree with Michael. And I've been fortunate enough to have a couple discussions with you over the last few days learning this process. And I appreciate your willingness to share and all of that. Let me go from a person who hasn't been doing it to someone that listened to you talk about it a couple times. And let me give you my summary, which may help others summarize it that haven't had as much time to do this. So a good summary was you figure out whatever the topic is that you want to get art about. And you have a process that you've come up with, and you shared those words with those key things. And then you go to AI. In this case, you go to Copilot. Other people may go somewhere else, but in your case, your process says go to Copilot. Yep. Because you found that to be the most simple and straightforward AI that you've come across so far.
Yep.
I would agree with that. Although I want to try Midjourney because Michael Bernasconi, who's also very good at this, has found some good results with that. And one of these days, I hope to have Michael on and talk a little bit about how he's using Midjourney also, because he's got some prompts and things he's worked on, but we got to get him broken away from rebuilding his house.
Yeah, I would love to explore different, like Midjourney. I went to Midjourney and I couldn't figure it out. So
that's me too. That's my problem. It's too complicated.
Yeah.
So basically, the big thing with the AI was the fact that you don't go there expecting to find something the first shot out. If you do, that's great. But you made a comment that sometimes I'll spend an hour or more just looking at images that the software is throwing at me. And I know through my experience of using Copilot, when I was doing some of this stuff myself, not at your level, but more for lasering, that I found it seemed like Copilot now this was a couple months ago, had a bad habit of cutting off half the frame or something. So it would cut off the right half or the left half.
It does a lot. It does a lot.
So it's still happening a lot.
Yep.
Yeah. So people don't get frustrated when you go there and you do some searches and think you're doing something wrong. This is my point. Don't get frustrated and think you're doing something wrong because the pictures aren't coming out right. I wanted to point out, Chris says he has to spend sometimes he'll get lucky and hit it out the first bat, but that's not the norm. And so be ready for that. So that's your process of getting it out of there. Now, once he has his picture, his image, the way he wants it, and he downloads it from the software, he takes it into another software, Marigold. It's an image, it's a website, it's free, so that he can get a depth map. The depth map is critical to this process. And so by taking it into Marigold and transferring it into a depth map, he now has two images, a depth map image and a regular image that he's going to bring into the Vectrix software, Aspire. And it is important to note that this is an Aspire only issue to make the model. And I'm going to get to the VCAR part in a second. So you need Aspire when you're modeling. That's why you pay, for sarcastical term, the big bucks for Aspire. That's what separates Aspire from VCAR. So please don't get frustrated or upset. It is what the differentiation is between the softwares that Vectrix makes its money off of. I'm not a spokesman for Vectrix. I just recognize what the difference is. So he goes into Aspire and he brings both images in through using the import image bitmap function. And when he brings it in, he mentioned that he brings in his bitmap, his image, his depth map. That's what I was looking for. Depth map first. And once he brings it in, the first thing he has to do is he has to invert that bitmap so that it's in the right direction. And once he's inverted the bitmap, then he has to take that bitmap and convert it to a component. And so that's two different buttons, actually three for the depth image, three different buttons he's clicking on Aspire to get there. And then he does his adjustments, which he has picked up over time. You just have to play with it. He moves it up and down to where it meets his artistic eye and what he's used to, you know? So recognize that you may not get it right the first time. And since Chris introduced this to me and Michael on another time, I've been playing with a little bit. And I'm slowly getting better myself, but I'm not at their level. It just takes patience. Which I don't always have the most of. And so once he has that settled in to the level he wants it, the next thing that Chris does is he brings in the regular image that he got from the AI system. And he imports that, and then he makes that a component. Once again, two buttons. He plays with that till he gets that where he wants it. And then he goes in there, and that's where he starts doing the magic. That's where he decides where his vectors need to be so that he can build up the model in certain areas. And that really does take some practice and some skill and an eye and playing with it. My technical term, playing with it till he can get to the point. And once he has the bumps and lumps, I'll call it, in the right spots, he then starts to use the vectoric tools such as smoothing, tilt, fade, up, down in height, until he gets to the point where he thinks he's got a really nice model the way he wants it. Now, the point that I want to make with when he's working with all of those tools, the point I want to make is that he has to save often, and he wants to, when he's doing the smoothing and others, there's a little button down there that says keep. And after he's worked for a while, he hits that keep, because if you don't, and now you get to a point where you accidentally slip with your mouse, don't ask him how he knows, and you want to discard it. You don't want to discard a couple hours worth of work. So, so once he gets through all of that smoothing and fading and tilting, he gets into the point where he's going to set up the toolpaths for actually carving this. And he hasn't gone through that yet. Would you like to go through that, Chris? How you go about setting up the toolpaths?
Sure, absolutely. So if I'm in this model here, what I do is I will take this model, this is the final model. I'll highlight it, and then you come down to the bottom in Aspire, and it says create a vector boundary around the selected component, which is actually the entire square. So I'm going to select that. Now I have a vector. So this one is pretty simple because it's just a square. I'll go over to my toolpaths, and the first thing you want to do is you need to check your setup. You need to see, maybe you've forgotten what you've put in when you opened your design. So this down here will tell us how thick my model is. 4.7202. I can change that if I want, and where in my wood that model is. What I would do is, I'm okay with this thickness. If I want to make it bigger, you can go into set, and you can type in 0.6. Make it 0.6 thick. So now it's 0.6, and it changes everything. I also don't.
So, Chris, if you change the thickness of the model, what impact does that have on your model? Why don't you share that?
It will literally have an impact. So here's the model. So if I go back into here, and change it to 0.3, it made a huge difference.
So it really flattened it out.
It flattened it out where this is not what I wanted.
But that may be that might be what somebody else wants, right?
Correct. Somebody might want that. So, and it all depends on what type of, let's say you only have a 3/4 inch piece of wood. You have to fit it inside that. So this is where you can manipulate. There's two places you can manipulate it. This is one place. It was what? Let's say it was 0.47. Let's go with 0.5. That looks bad. That doesn't look bad. 0.5 is not bad. It's a good, that's a 1/2 inch thick. Now that's the only place in here that I can manipulate it. If I wanted the body or the base piece thicker, if I wanted to make this a plaque and I wanted to have a bigger plaque base, I would then just get out of here. I would say okay or cancel. And then I would go back to my modeling. And then I would literally manipulate it from here. I would add a base to it. So now I'm making this whole thing thicker, but not changing the model thickness. So now if you go back into here with Aspire and I hover over this, now it's telling me the whole model is almost it's 5.89 inches thick. So if we like that, that's great. So now we keep that, go back over to our modeling, check this. So now I got it programmed as it's a 1 inch piece of wood. So wherever you want to put your piece is where you move this. Do you want it totally on the top where there's nothing there? I use rough lumbers a lot. So it may be rough on the top or it may not be perfectly flat. So I learned from Kyle and from Becky from Vectric, start it whatever this is, 1/10 of an inch below the surface of the wood. That way you're guaranteed that the model will be clean and you won't have any flat spots on the top of your model. I always do that. Me personally, I have the air weight system, so it's a vacuum table. So I don't cut through my model ever. So what I do is I put the gap to the model of the model to 0.07. So this is where the model starts this far down. But when it carves this entire thing, it'll carve all the way down to 0.07. One of the reasons why I like doing this is you get a smooth bottom. Your edges around your carve, if you've done a round piece and you had any type of shape on the bottom of your piece, it's going to be smooth right off the machine because that taper ball nose goes all the way down to this level. That's what I do. If you're not using you could still do it if you're nailing it down to your spoil board, but then that's all you're going to have to cut through for your profile pass. So that's how I keep it. So I keep that, and I'll hit OK. And then I'll go into my roughing pass. Always do a roughing pass. Always. You may think you're saving time, but you're going to break bits if you don't. That's my tip. I've broken enough bits not using roughing passes. And I follow Becky and Todd's numbers for carving and their toolpaths. I start a machining allowance of 0.003. the roughing pass is going to leave on the top. So your finishing bit is only cutting that much. So your finishing bit is not doing a lot of work, and it'll stay sharper longer. And you can go faster. So you can pick up some speed there. So however your strategy is, you pick. I use the 3D raster. A lot of people don't. You can use whatever you want. You can do Z level. You can change your level, whether it's a 90-degree angle or a 45, depending on what kind of wood you're using and the grain pattern. Things will carve better on an angle. Some things will carve better against the grain, with the grain. That's what I found. I think it's just you got to figure out what's best for you. But for the roughing pass, it doesn't really matter too much. And then I calculate that roughing.
So a couple of differences in my experience, Chris, is I typically use Kyle's number of 0.04 for that machining allowance.
Yep.
And before you go to that, I wanted to point out, because we've had some discussions about bits, right? And you swear by the IDC, the Beast and the Rough, and whatever the other one is. And I bring that up because I've had several discussions with Jim Matthews, and he does the same thing. He swears by the IDC bits, the Hog and the Beast and all that.
Yep.
So what is it you like about those bits?
Well, first off, I like the Beast because it's not as long. The Hog is a longer bit, and I find you may get more flex when you're going, because the idea behind the Beast is, or the roughing bit is, to go as fast as you can to get that cleared out. And because I set my model lower into my material, sometimes I have, 0.25, a quarter of an inch that I got to get through before it's getting to the model area. So the roughing, the Beast, is my go-to, and it works phenomenal. And I find I did 0.4, like you said, 0.04. I find that's fine, but I found if I went just a little bit more, your tapered ball finishing bit has less to work.
Good.
Less wear and tear. You can go a little faster. So
good information.
Some people ask me, how long do my carves take? Well, granted, they're not that big. They're only 5 inches, diameter, or 5 inches square. Most of my carves, most of these will take you about, depending on your machine, if you set your, I can do mine in anywhere from 2 hours and 15 minutes to 2 hours and a half, 2.5 hours. So for the finishing pass. Roughing pass may take 3 minutes or 5 minutes total. So they're not long carves. I know some people have, now if you make this a 12-inch model, it's going to take 5 or 6 hours. No, regardless. It's just because you're making a bigger model. So I use, and I select a vector for it. And here's my model. And as you can see, it drops down. This is why I use the Beast, because it has to clear all of this before it gets to the model. So the Beast will do it in because you can set the Beast for, IDC says you can go 0.75 per pass. I don't. That makes me nervous. So I go 0.5. 0.5 is still quite a bit. So I can do this in 1 or 2 passes. And I'm doing it at probably 100, depending, anywhere from 80 to 100 inches per minute. So if I preview this, so that's 2 passes it's taking only.
That's pretty awesome information.
Yeah, if you're using just a regular upcut or downcut 1/4 inch, you can only go 0.25 depth for every pass. You're going to do 4 or 5 passes. This is 2 passes. It's crazy.
So,
Yeah.
Chris, Kurt out there, otherwise known as Crafty Jan,
Yeah.
you see his comment on the screen here. He says, using the hog
Yep.
at a 1/2 inch, I found I need to screw it down because the tape won't hold it because there's just walnut flying all over the place. How do you hold your material down?
Correct. I use a vacuum table and it doesn't
Oh,
move.
that's correct. You said that.
But when I was using, and when I do use the double tape CA glue method, I always screw it down in the corners because inevitably that tape fails because it's stuck to fuzzy MDF, spoil board. Sometimes it just doesn't hold. So I always use screws if I'm not using the vacuum table. I found the vacuum table, I got it from Airweight Systems, and it's not cheap, but it has made my life so easy. That's just a little plug for him, but that's what I use. And I could probably go 400 inches a minute and it's not going to move. It's secure. I'm 200 pounds and I can't push my piece of wood, even if it's just this big, off of that vacuum table.
Okay.
Sorry
for interrupting. Go ahead and do your finished pass now.
That's good. So then if I go back to, now I've done my roughing, I'm going to go to my finish tool. This is the tool I use for a lot of my models because they're very fine detail. It's a speed tool, very inexpensive. It's a 4.82 degree taper ball nose.
So if you send that to me, Chris, outside of this, I'll put a link in the for both of those bits, for the IDC bit and the speed tool. Okay,
I most certainly will. And again, I select my vector. This is another thing to get a smooth carve on the outside of your model. I use a 0.1 boundary offset. That I've found that it really rolls that tapered ball nose down almost the entire model edge. I tell you, I have 10 minutes of sanding for any of these things. It's crazy. I use 2 different methods, whether it's offset or raster, and that all depends on the wood that I'm using. I can tell you offset is going to be a faster carve because the router was not going to have to go up and down and move around up and down, whereas the offset just kind of goes in a circle and moves its way around, going up and down as it's doing it. It makes it much quicker. So everyone has their strategies. Some people could argue with what I do. People have, I've shown you my models. They come out very nice, very little sanding. And now you see here why I said it's fast. You don't see all kinds of green lines. These green lines means it's going up and down, up and down, up and down. I've got 2. Everything else is blue. That means that bit's going down and staying down and working. So therefore, this carve will happen a lot fast. It's a much more efficient. Whoop. So I'm sorry. So we're going to preview that. You can see that the bit's not moving up and down. It just follows the pattern and stays down.
Now, Chris, the reason I shy away from the that finishing method in the past is I like to go with the grain because it seemed like I had more tool marks. But it sounds like with the bit you're using and the parameters you did, from our conversations, you don't have that problem. You do this, and then you just have a sanding mop or something you use at the end to clean it up. Is that right?
Yeah. I found that as the bit wears, I've done about this bit, I'll get about 15 to 20 carves in cherry, which is hardwood, before you start seeing tool marks and fuzziness. So the sanding will get more difficult. But if you're using a nice sharp tool, and you use maybe a smaller step over, I can't remember what my step over. It may be 5 or 6%. It's pretty small. I get very little tool marks. You get some, and then the sanding will take care of most of it. And I will send you, Rob, I'll link to the type of sanding mops. They're not the typical sanding mop. I think they're like a nylon one, which you can get, and you can get anywhere from 180 grit all the way up to 1,000 grit. And I use 240 to start after these models are done. After 240, I go to either 320 or 400, and I'm done.
Yeah, that's great, Chris. Any of the tools that you use and will share, I'll put links in the description so people can easily go find them, because I mean, you're the guy that's been milling these out like crazy. And so if anybody's got some experience, it'll be people like you and Mike.
Yeah. And so if I just cut this out. So here's the end up. Now, if you look at this tool, you see the edge. That's because I do a 0.1 boundary offset. That bit will go all the way down. And it's really pretty. It's really a smooth cut at the end. You have very little work to clean this up. And if you look at my times, two hours and 43 minutes. And I have tweaked my numbers. This is really pretty accurate on my times. Roughing pass 5 minutes, finishing pass 2.5 hours. Profile was 2 minutes. So 2.5 hours for this pass. You can try, when you're doing yours, try it. The other method is your other method for your finishing pass, and just look at your times, see which is going to change. If I select raster, you'll see the difference in times. So that was 2 hours and 35 minutes for the car, and 1, 2, 3, 4 green spots. So there's maybe not as many. Okay, there's not as much, but let's. I just hit the and then. I have it set when I do this method. I do like 22 degrees, 22.5 degrees, 30 degrees, because I find it does best if I have a grainy, like an oak. If I'm doing oak and it's real grainy, that's what I like to use, that type of degree when I'm cutting things. And everyone will find their own, whether they go 90 degrees, however the grain is situated on their piece of wood. I'm not the expert. I just know what works for me. I'm sorry, this is going to take a little while. Yeah, the bits that I use, I was cutting the bodies, for a box for a model, and I didn't pay attention, and something happened, and my spindle did not turn on, and it went to carve, and it dove into the wood, and just first move it made, it shattered my bit. So I
Yeah,
I just
we have
ordered a
those.
new one. I'm waiting for it to come.
We have those things happening, and it happens to all of us as we go through this process.
Oh yeah,
Over the years. So yeah, uh, Corey. Apparently, Corey knows a lot about your carving. Corey Cavalier.
he does. He lives near me. He's the one who got me into some of this computer stuff. Yes.
Yeah, so he's got some comments in here, and he said that you use an 8% step over, and the other
Yeah.
thing he said is maybe you want to click on the toolpath and hit edit to show them what bits. Now you can do that if you want, but I will go ahead and put the bits, like I said, in the
Yep.
description, however you want to handle that.
Yep. I could do that really quick too. Now, as you can see, I just finished this, and look at the time. Almost 3 hours if I do that strategy. So that's why I don't generally use this strategy, because it just takes longer. And I don't think I get a better result. I think it's, to me, I use cherry a lot, even maple, and I don't see a huge drastic difference. And I don't necessarily find that I need to sand any more or any less with either one. But everybody's machine and the way they set things up may be different.
Fair enough, but you've got it. We're listening to you because you've got a bunch of them you've made, and I want to learn from your experience. So I can play off what you said and go to something different if we want. But what I like to do, and everybody has their own opinion, is if I find somebody that is doing it, I first want to try what they're doing, and then for some reason, if I think something will be done better, I'll go ahead and change. But why not try what they're doing that's been successful for them first? So I appreciate you sharing the details you are, because that gives me the opportunity to make decisions from there.
Right. I know a lot of people. I mean, I get a lot of these questions. So here's the finishing bit. I have it set for 7%. 100 inches a minute at 75 plunge. This is a teeny tiny bit. You know it. You've used it. And it handles this all day long.
Good point.
The roughing, which is the beast. So it's an 80% step over, 100 inches a minute, 80 plunge. And it's at 0.5 pass depth. It's a beast. That's all I can say. And I love it. It just makes, if you're doing bowls, and you want to do it faster than just using the bowl bit for the entire cut, use the beast and use an offset so it's not cutting all of it, and then come back with your finishing pass of a bowl bit, and it'll be half the wear and tear on your bowl bit, and you'll get this really smooth cut, and you'll get way more use out of your bowl bit, and let the roughing bit just chew up the wood.
Sounds good, bud.
Yep.
All right, let me look in through here. I try to keep to an hour plus or minus 15 minutes. We've exceeded the plus 15 minutes, but gosh, you've provided so much useful information. I didn't want to stop. Let me just look to see if there's any questions before I check out. I can't see any right now, but Chris, I can't tell you how grateful I am that you shared this knowledge. And I'm certainly already started yesterday in trying to, in trying to do some models myself. I sent Chris a model right after our first day's conversation and said, okay, I know it's not finalized. It's not perfect yet, but would you have ideas or anything? And he said, sure, I'll get back to you and we'll talk about it. But just after, I will say, go out there. My motto is learn from others, then share what you learn, and then inspire others or motivate others to do cool stuff. That's what I like to do. And that's what I'm going to tell you guys. Now that you've learned some stuff, if you have any questions, come back and review the video. And if there are questions that you don't get from the video, Chris has made it clear in the past that he's open to helping people out. So reach out to Chris. I'll put a link to his Facebook page. He's very prolific on posting on Facebook. And so I'll put that in the video description. So all that stuff will be in there by tomorrow, all the stuff we talked about. And go have some fun. Go try this thing. And Michael Bernasconi, who's done a lot of these too, for those of you that are also in Mark Lindsay's group, have seen or on the Make or on Facebook, Mike posts a lot of his models there. Mike basically indicated that basically the same process that Chris described is very similar to the process he uses. And so go have some fun. Go create some chips, and you won't know how well you can do or how much work you need until you go out and try it a little bit. Don't be afraid to make mistakes or fail, and go for it. Now, I do want to cover one other thing in this, and I don't know if Chris's offer is still good, so I hate to put him on the spot, but because he shared this process, Chris basically said he would give me the STL to give to you guys for free. So I'll put a description. I'll put a link in the description that if you want the STL model, and we can do another session sometime about how you would take the STL and carve it or change it. If you want an STL model of this whitetail buck, normally he sells them, but he's willing to give it away if you reference the fact that you watched the video, put a comment in there and say, make a comment and say, thanks, Chris, for the model. And if I see your name and thanks, Chris, for the model in the comments, you can get it for free. And just go to my website. And so with that, I think we'll wrap up. Oh, the thing I wanted to say is that, no, you can't make this outside of Aspire. Well, you can if you use like Blender or another Fusion 360 or something like that. You could do it. But as far as vector products, you need Aspire. With that said, if somebody else makes a model like Chris did and he saves it or exports it as an STL, you can go ahead and carve this and play with it as an STL model inside of VCarve. So it's not that you can't do anything with VCarve, it's just you can't create the model. So with that, everybody have a great day. And until we meet in this medium again, I hope you're going out and doing something fun. Chris, is there any one last thing you want to say? Since you're my guest, I'd give you the last word.
Well, just get out there and try. I would love for people to share their creations with me because I love to see new creations, and it's all the community is just an enjoyable place to be, and we can all learn from each other. So trust me, I'm all ears with suggestions. So I just thank everybody for watching.
Yeah, and nope, that's the wrong. I clicked on the wrong one here. It's flipping through too fast. What I wanted to, here it is, Tim. This will be available in perpetuity unless YouTube kicks me off, because it'll be under my live sessions. If you ever want to see this again, I think the chat comes up, everything. You can watch it multiple times if you want. You can like, comment, share it. You can do all of that stuff just like you can any other video. It'll be under my live section. So it's there whenever you need it. All right. Have a good night, everybody. End in the stream.